Welcome to the Santa Cruz Coffee Break. If you're watching on YouTube or listening on Apple Podcast, please follow, hit the like button, or any subscribes. It really helps us with the algorithms. Santa Cruz Coffee Break is produced by the Santa Cruz Guitar Players Forum. All opinions are those of the speakers. We invite you to join us on the Santa Cruz Guitar Players Forum at SCGCPF for more fun. Now, let's get on with this installment of Santa Cruz Coffee Break. We would like to welcome everybody to Santa Cruz Guitar Players Forum podcast number 29. And boy, do we have somebody we're excited about today. Let me present to you Teja Gerken. He is a Bay Area guitarist and has enchanted audiences ever since coming onto the acoustic fingerstyle scene in the late 1990s. Initially influenced by guitarists such as John Renbourn, Michael Hedges, and Leo Kottke, Teja ultimately began weaving together his diverse musical interest into a style of his own, releasing his debut album On My Way in 1999. And in the 2 decades since, he's released 2 others, Postcards in 2005 and in 2020, duets with Doug Young, correct?
That's correct.
I'm good on that? Mm-hmm. Great. He's at ease in performance settings ranging from intimate house concerts to cafes, clubs, concert halls, and festival stages. He's performed at many of the Bay Area's top acoustic music venues, and these are legendary: Freight and Salvage, Great American Music Hall, and in Santa Barbara at Soho, the Colony in Woodstock, New York, Club Passam in Cambridge, Massachusetts, a really legendary club, and Argentina Music Series in Little Rock, Arkansas. Boy, I blew that one, didn't I? Argenta Acoustic Music Series in Little Rock, Arkansas. Also in Berlin, Luxembourg. Festivals: Healdsburg Guitar Festival, Winners, Santa Barbara Acoustic, and Dresden Guitar Festivals. And besides all that, he's a writer. If this isn't enough, I'm exhausted already. He's written about guitars, guitarists, and related subjects. He was the senior editor of Acoustic Guitar Magazine from 1997 to 2013. Boy, that ought to be a big gold star. Contributed to Guitar Player, Premier Guitar, Fretboard Journal. And in 2014, he co-founded Peghead Nation, an online e-learning environment with instruction for guitar, banjo, mandolin, ukulele, fiddle, bass, and dobro. I've been a client for Peghead for a long time. It's a wonderful thing to get to do. You wrote the book, The Taylor Guitar.
I did.
You did. The list is amazing. Teja, welcome.
Thank you. It's great to hang out with you guys.
Yeah, it's great to have. It's great to have you.
It's always hard when you have a guest where when you run through their bio and their accomplishments, you feel like you're almost out of time for the.
Well, I don't know. It all strings together.
How'd you get started?
Well, with the guitar, I mean, my dad plays guitar, not particularly well, but growing up, I grew up in Germany. Start out there. My dad played a little guitar, and he had some musician friends, including a couple of professional musician friends. So people playing instruments wasn't something that was foreign to me. People would come over and play guitars. It was your typical kind of, hippie scene, really. So
what time span?
This is mid-70s. I was born in 1970. So, I think from around my 6th birthday, I think maybe 5 or 6, I got a guitar. And my dad would show me some chords, some basic sort of first position chords and stuff. And that, kind of went on like that for a while. And then a few years later, we moved to southern Germany near Munich. And at that point, I was a teenager, so I was a little bit more mobile on my own. And I would, from the town that we lived in, I could take the train into Munich. And there was a great sort of community music school there that I used to go, and I took a bunch of classes there in Munich, and that's kind of where I started to do a little finger picking and that kind of thing, and just became more serious about it at that point. And then shortly thereafter, my family moved to California, and I went to high school here in California, and that's kind of really when things started to, take off a little bit more. I found another great teacher that I was taking private lessons with, and was playing, some electric guitar and some blues, but kept doing a little bit of basic finger picking and stuff. Um, but then it really wasn't until after college. I didn't study music in college, but it was sort of after college that I realized that I'm probably in pretty deep in this. And I started again. I've been really fortunate to have a great string of teachers all along, from doing the thing in Munich to having a private teacher in my family moved up to Mendocino, north of here. I'm in the Bay Area now, um, and I took lessons with this guy into each other at the Santa Barbara festival, which was amazing because I hadn't seen him in almost 30 years. Um, and so that's kind of how I got into it. Just it was really just a personal interest. So really the spark that made it happen from something that I just did to something that might be something that I do for a living, or that just sort of becomes my life. Was when I went to a liberal arts college called World College West, and it actually doesn't exist anymore. It used to be in Petaluma, California, and they had programs for students to spend most of a year living in a developing country. And I lived in Mexico, and the program was in the state of Michoacan, where there's this great village called Paracho. Have you guys heard of Paracho?
Mm-hmm. Is
Yeah.
it guitar?
Yeah. So Paracho is a guitar making village. It's to this day, it's really the most amazing thing I've ever seen. It's this entire village revolves around building guitars. There's literally hundreds of luthiers and industry around it. There'll be people who, I mean, I think I never saw it, but apparently they make strings there, and there'll be guys there who all they do is make rosettes, and all the luthiers buy their rosettes from this guy, and so there's this whole industry around it. And so part of this college program that I was in was to live in a village, live with a family, and learn a craft. And so, hello, I said I want to go to Paracho and learn to build a guitar. And we found a way to do it. And actually, since I figured there might be a little bit of a show and tell, this is the guitar.
Wow.
Yeah. So yeah, here. Someday I'll have to show you in person. I can't really say that I built this guitar. I was there while the guy who I was living with and working with, Salvador Caro Salapa, built this guitar. And he let me do a few steps here and there, but it's really beautiful Palo Escrito back and sides. It's actually, it looks like a cedar top, but it's actually a spruce top that for mysterious reasons, we ended up dyeing to look dark yellow, dark brown. It's a Brazilian rosewood fingerboard and bridge, and it's a pretty nice guitar. I mean, I performed with this guitar for a long time, so I did that, and that sort of, how could you not like living with a luthier and building a guitar for 3 months in the mountains of Mexico? So I came back. That was my sophomore year in college. I came back and I continued playing. I should say I haven't built a guitar since that experience, which is now 32 years ago. But after college, I ended up getting a job in a music store, Tall Toad Music in Petaluma. And that was sort of my entry in doing something around guitars for a living. And I worked there for 5 years. And during that time, started to also get more serious about playing fingerstyle guitar and started gigging. So this would be between 92 and 97. Um, and things sort of started taking off from there. And it just kind of, I don't know, it was never really my plan to make the guitar what I do, but it sort of happened naturally.
When when you were in Germany, how were you finding music? Were there was there stores, or were you seeing? How were you finding? How was it
Well,
finding
it was
finding
pretty
in?
limited, and part of it was I had no idea what was out there, when it was kind of like, my dad was into kind of, folk rock and stuff. I mean, there was a lot of like Crosby, Stills and Nash and Bob Dylan. But he did, my dad really was into John Renbourn and the Pentangle. And that to this day, I mean, if people ask me who is my number one guitar guy, and it's Renbourn. And Pentangle is probably my all-time favorite band. So I started listening to some of that. I started listening to a little bit of classical guitar. Um, these classes that I was taking in Munich, we were kind of, doing sort of the basic kind of folky repertoire. We'd learn like a finger picking thing to House of the Rising Sun. And I don't know, maybe we even did Freight Train or something like that. It's so long ago now, but it was that kind of stuff. But it wasn't really at that time that I was diving deep into finding records or something. It was pretty elementary.
I don't imagine that the radio is what it was or what it is here now, or was through the 80s and 90s here or wherever.
Well, if there was really interesting radio, I wasn't listening to it. I mean, I was listening to mainstream radio and stuff. Um, I didn't really, outside of sort of my dad's circle of friends, I didn't have, my peers didn't play guitar. I wasn't really, it wasn't really that thing. But then, I left Germany when I was 16, so it was pretty early. And when we came over here, I definitely, playing guitar was sort of something that made me meet people, and I made friends here that played guitar, and that was something that we shared, and so in that way, it became an important part of growing up.
Did you bring your guitar over from
I
Germany?
do actually. I should have brought that out here. It's in the other part of the house now. I my first well my very first guitar was a Framus.
Oh yeah.
And yeah, and I actually, it turns out, unbeknownst to me, my folks brought it over years ago, and I found it in their attic a couple of
Hmm.
years ago, and it's in terrible shape. It's beyond repair, basically. I mean, it's not the kind of guitar that's worth restoring. Um, but my first sort of okay guitar, which I still have, is a guitar made by Hoyer. You ever heard of Hoyer?
Hmm.
Hoyer.
Hmm.
I think it was a German company. This guitar was made in Japan. It's a copy of a Gibson Dove. It's got the red back and sides, and it had the big pickguard on it, but it came off at some point. It's got the horrible adjustable Gibson style bridge, and it's got a really crude kind of Fender style bolt on neck. But I still have that, and it's not a bad guitar. I could have done a lot worse. So that's really what I played. That's what I played through college, actually. And I actually have it set up as a high strung now. I occasionally use it. So
Cool.
so I brought it over. Yeah. Yeah.
You came to then college. You're a sophomore.
Mm.
You're living in Mexico.
Hmm.
Wow.
It's in hindsight, it was kind of crazy. I mean, and Paracho is not, I mean, I was there in the winter of 1989 to 1990. At the time,
Hmm.
the family I lived with, they sort of had two houses, one that they lived in and one was the workshop. But the workshop house was also, I mean, it was a residence at one point, and that's actually where I lived. My room was in that house with the shop. And Mexico is odd that way. Like it was basically a sort of modern house, but had no running water. So, you would, a water truck would come every couple of weeks, and they would fill up these barrels, and to, bathe or whatever, um, you would take all these pans and everything like that. There was no shower or anything like that. There was electricity because you can run wires easily. But the street outside the house wasn't paved, so it was a dirt road outside. And Paracho isn't a tiny village. I mean, when I was living there, I think there was a size of about 10, 15,000 people living there. So, not like super tiny. And the main street, of course, was paved, and you could take a bus to the larger city and stuff like that. But it was pretty interesting.
Have you been
And
back? Have you been back?
I have been back once, but it's also now 25 years ago. So I really want to go back. From what I hear, the drug war is really taking a heavy toll on the town. And I was talking with what's his name, Alejandro, guy from Santa Cruz, who also builds Alejandro Cervantes, who's from there, and he was saying that things had really taken a turn. So that's not good. So I don't know. I really hope to get back one day.
Yeah.
Great.
So you came up and you're working at Tall Toad. Is this where you started making connections and getting more into the
Pretty much. Yeah, I mean, so I started working at Tall Toad, and started getting into fingerstyle guitar, and really, a big sort of moment within that. I mean, first of all, I was exposed to all these guitars, right, which is great. Not really, by what we think of today as super high-end guitars, but we carried Martins and Taylors, and we were actually a Santa Cruz dealer for a very short time, but I forget why, but somehow it didn't work out for us. But just being exposed to a lot of guitars, which was super fun but one sort of big moment for me as a developing player was Chris Proctor would come and do these Taylor workshops once or twice a year. Are you guys familiar with Chris Proctor?
Mm-hmm.
He is a really, really fine fingerstyle player. I think he won Winfield like in '82 or something like that. And he would come and do these Taylor workshops. And he was really the first guy that I was able to see play fingerstyle up close, and I could ask questions. Like, I mean, I'd seen people perform, I'd seen Renborn perform, I'd seen other people perform, but it's different when you can sit right there and you can chat afterwards and say, how did you do that? What tuning was that? What are those pedals you're using? All that kind of stuff. So Chris was really sort of the first guy that I could really sort of geek out on guitars and pickups and fingerstyle technique. And he was really important in sort of that, developing and me becoming who I am really. I bought a Taylor guitar similar to the one he had. I bought a Sunrise pickup. I got a Rain preamp that he was using. I basically sort of emulated his whole rig, and that took me quite a way, sort of, those, like, whatever, like I said, he'd come once or twice a year, and it would really sort of give me a boost every time. And then it wasn't directly through working at the store, but sort of my next connection with a really good player was I hooked up with Peppino D'Agostino. And he did come through because we were a Seagull and Godin dealer, and I think he did a couple of Godin classes, but I already met him independently through, I think I went to see him play, and somehow we hooked up. And that was really great. I mean, I took lessons with Peppino for a couple of years, and I really consider him one of my mentors. He took me under his wing, and we did this funny thing where I went for my first lesson and I wrote him a check for the first 4 lessons or whatever. And then it turned out that he really needed computer help. And so we basically came up with this deal where we traded computer lessons for guitar lessons. And it became this really fun kind of friendship where I would go over to his house and we'd do a lesson for an hour. And then, I'd show him things on his Mac for an hour. And that sort of ended up then I'd stay for lunch or we would do something. And so it would turn into this whole afternoon, a whole evening thing. And that kind of went on for a couple of years. And it was really fun. And then, as I was getting a more secure player, he started having me open some shows for him and that kind of stuff. And so that was really great and really important. And uh, in hindsight, it's even more special than it seemed like at the time. I mean, just to have that develop that relationship with someone who's a really good established player was just really great and super important.
I think that mentor relationship, it really is. So many stories of people that for some reason or another hooked up with one of their idols.
Yeah.
You know,
Well, and the other thing is, Peppino was really well connected and still is, of course. So I'd go over there for my lesson, and it turned out that, like, Tim Sparks was staying at his house while he's playing in town, So I'd meet people through Peppino and stuff like that. And it really kind of opened some doors, and I'm, really thankful to him for that.
the first time I saw him really in a small house concert, and he
Yeah.
just blew my mind. Just
Oh, he's amazing, and he's very positive, and so that was really important. And basically, all the tunes that are on my first CD on postcards are sort of tunes that we worked on during our lessons. I mean, I would sort of bring in these fairly half-baked ideas, and he'd sort of help me finish them up and turn them into tunes that I could record. So we, in a way, he almost sort of produced the CD. He wasn't directly involved, but that CD wouldn't be what it is without sort of him helping me shape all that stuff up. So that was back in 1999. So it's it was a long time ago. So to kind of keep this thread going, so I worked at Tall Toad for about 5 years, and through that time, I think through Peppino, I had met Dylan Shora, who at the time was the music editor for Acoustic Guitar. And we had hooked up. We might have played a couple of gigs together of some kind. Acoustic Guitar started posting a position for a gear editor, which was a new position for them. And Dylan let me know about it, and I applied for it. And I interviewed for it with Jeff Rogers at one of the first Healdsburg Guitar Festivals. It would have been the 1997 Healdsburg Guitar Festival when it was still up in the villa in Santa Cruz, in Healdsburg. And I ended up getting the job. And so I quit Tall Toad and did that and started out as the gear editor for the magazine, and then eventually became senior editor, and that went through for 17 years.
Wow.
So, and through that, of course, you work for a magazine, you meet a lot of people, and it did help me sort of get more established in the fingerstyle scene. I ended up, meeting a lot more players and getting more actively involved in the Bay Area guitar scene and hosting people from out of town and doing things like that. So yeah, it kind of, one thing led to another.
Well, I'm sure that also gives you a lot of industry connections and
well, yeah, of course.
That sounds wonderful.
Yeah, I mean, I probably met Richard Hoover, shortly after working for Acoustic Guitar. Probably the first NAMM show I went to with Acoustic Guitar, which would have been 98, certainly. I'd gone to NAMM before because I went to a couple of NAMM shows with Tall Toad Music, but really going to NAMM with AG, I'd meet everybody. Yeah. So that is really a way to say that probably since that NAMM show, 1998. I've been deep into it and have basically met, all the people in the industry who are part of this community.
That's amazing. That's really amazing. So, and then at some point you decided to strike out on your own and create this new entity that you're involved with.
Well, yeah, I mean, the decision was ultimately made for me. Ultimately, AG being in print publishing had to make some adjustments and I don't know where they're at in terms of their adjustments. But part of the adjustments to adjusting to the reality of the digital world was to really shrink the editorial staff in 2013, and um, I ended up being laid off. It sort of was this thing where I was part-time for a while, and then in the end I was laid off, which ultimately was a blessing in disguise, because my two partners in Peghead Nation, Scott Nygaard and Dan Gable, who were also at acoustic guitar, left around the same time. We all left AG within like a 3 month period or something like that. And we decided it was time to start something new together. And it really is, it's a team effort. Peghead Nation is not something I could have done on my own. And I'm just incredibly fortunate and lucky to, have this team, to be working with people who I have a almost 25-year history of working with Dan and Scott.
Mm. The name is brilliant.
Thank you.
Is that a bar napkin, or is that a NAM thing, or?
We really tried to think. I think Dan ultimately came up with a name. We knew from the start we didn't want to be just guitar, so it basically couldn't have the name guitar in it. We played around with all kinds of different acoustic this, acoustic that, but so we came up with Peghead Nation, and it worked. You got to have a name.
Yeah. You got to call it something.
It is a little bit of torture, when you have this idea and you're already working on your business plan, but you still don't really have a name that sticks. So it was a good day when we finally decided. Yeah,
we could go back and rename all those documents that we've been writing.
Right.
We can find them again.
But so ultimately, super fortunate to find myself in this team with people who I've worked with for a long time, who I think all three of us we're friends, obviously, but we also know each other's strengths, and starting from scratch doing something has really allowed us to do that. And so we're fairly well defined roles, even though there's always crossover. I mean, there's, other than the instructors that contribute to the lessons, it is just the three of us. We don't have a staff. So there's plenty of crossover of things that we do. Working at acoustic guitar was amazing for the first 10 years. It was really a dream job. Like we've said, I've got to meet so many people. I've got to learn so much, make so many friends in the industry. But toward the end, as things started to sort of, well, I don't want to say deteriorate, but definitely, as things became harder in the print publishing world, and I had been doing things for as long as I had, it was time to move on. And but it's hard to move on when you basically like what you're doing. So like I said, being laid off ended up being a blessing in disguise, and it sort of allowed us to do this this thing that's been really great.
So interestingly, being an editor at Acoustic Guitar Magazine, it gave you an opportunity to kind of see where the technology and the industry was moving during a period of time where, like you say, the print media was dying out, digital was becoming more common. How did that play into the development, or I guess I want to say, how did that affect what your decisions were about what you wanted Peghead Nation to be?
Well, we knew from the start that we weren't going to be a print publication. That's really the biggest takeaway from it. We decided, basically right away that the main focus was going to be on instruction. So for me, that changed my role quite a bit, because at acoustic guitar for, the first 9 or 10 years, gear was all I did. I'd do all the gear demos. I would either write them or oversee them and edit all the stuff. Whereas now, my main role is a video producer. I am at most of the shoots, and I edit almost all the video. So that really is fundamentally, I am the producer. That's what I do. But I also still do all the gear related stuff. I do the majority of guitar demos, shooting them, and I also am still the person who is in touch with the manufacturers, with the luthiers, who will represent Peghead Nation at a NAMM show or a guitar festival and that sort of thing. So that has sort of really expanded what I do. I do less writing. We don't do like feature length articles and things like that. And so that was a big change, sort of turning, into more of a video person than someone who writes a lot. And that is kind of, I think that's a bit of a sign of the times. I mean, we started out doing a bit more kind of article type features on Peghead Nation, and it wasn't that popular. I think people really want the video content with things, and so again, since it's only the three of us, we have to focus on what works. And the video and certainly the instruction element of things is what works for us, and it's been working well. So we're very, very fortunate.
Moved into the corporate office tower and all that good stuff.
Well, of course, also known as a corner of my garage where I'm sitting right now. So, I'm joking, but we literally, we shot video in basically where I am right now for the first several years of Peghead Nation. We last year, just before the pandemic hit, moved into a great video studio in San Rafael. That's part of kind of a multimedia building, multi-use building there. And of course, we moved in there last January, and then the pandemic hit, and we weren't able to. I mean, the building was off limits for several months, basically. And I set myself back up here in the garage, so at least I could shoot gear demos. I started going back in probably last fall just to do shoots on my own, but we certainly still couldn't fly in instructors to shoot in there. But fortunately, that is just starting to ramp up. We just had Aaron Weinstein from New York, who does an amazing chord melody mandolin workshop for us and we're actually starting a course, a fingerstyle and open tunings course with Doug Young. And so we did a session with him last week, and we've got more stuff scheduled. So it's really great to sort of get back to being in the space. We don't have an actual office. We each work from our home offices. So having the studio is kind of the closest thing we have to a central location. And actually, I almost went there to do this today because I had some other things going on, but I didn't make it over there in time. So here I am back in my garage.
And just before we started, we were saying that this is the 29th podcast that Richard may have put together. Do you know how many lessons and reviews and everything else Peghead Nation has put out at this point? Do you have like chalk marks on the board or something?
We don't, but we are up to almost 40 courses on the different instruments. I've hit the upload button thousands of times. We get, our video host gives us these, I can see how many videos we have up there. And I think we might be up to like 8,000 videos or something like that. It's pretty crazy. Because, each lesson is usually broken down into between 2 and 5 little sections. And so, and there's updates every month for most courses. So it's a lot of material. We basically have a new gear demo every week. So, in the last 6-7 years, it's a lot of stuff.
That is a lot of stuff.
Staggering.
Yeah, it's a lot of, every now and then, like I said, I will see those stats, from our video hosts. And I was like, It's like another 1,000. It's like, and I was like, yeah, I hit the upload button for every single one of those. So, uh, yeah. So it's been really satisfying, and um, we were. I mean, speaking of, COVID and the pandemic, we were incredibly fortunate in that, we offered a service that people suddenly were looking for more than they were before. I mean, we've been very fortunate in that we've had consistent growth throughout. And, Peghead Nation has worked from the beginning, basically. It's been really, really fortunate for us. But we definitely saw a spike, like last May, just after the shutdown. And not only has it been satisfying for us to be able to keep working through this time, it's been really great to provide something to our instructors. Everyone's gigs went away and stuff like that. So for those instructors who would otherwise just rely on playing shows and things like that, Peghead Nation really became something of a steady source of revenue. Being able to do that for people has been really satisfying.
That's great. That's really great.
Yeah.
How many instruments do you have on Peghead Nation right now?
Let's see. We have guitar, mandolin, banjo, fiddle, ukulele, upright bass, and dobro, I think. So what's that? 7. Did I miss one? I don't think I did. Well, it's related, but we just started doing an octave mandolin course as well. But I guess that falls under mandolin. So yeah, it's been really great. And on the guitar side, I host this advanced fingerstyle workshop, which we put on hold a little bit, but there's 15 great lessons in there where I'm hosting players, including Eric Sky, who's got a great lesson on there with us. Scott Nygaard's got a couple of great flat picking courses. Matt Monasterio is doing an early roots jazz course. Orville Johnson's doing a couple of blues courses. Mark Goldenberg has a chord theory course that's incredible.
I've taken Mark's class.
It's
wow.
Yeah, and the fun thing about one of the fun things about doing this is I'm at all the shoots, so just being in the room, being in the presence of people like Mark, like pick any one of our instructor. People who are at the top of their game in that particular genre or whatever they're teaching, doing it really well and enjoying it, right, is a really special thing. To see Mark going through all these chords and basically going through all the lessons that he used to take with Ted Green, right, and explain this stuff. And it's Mark's course especially was pretty mind-blowing because he just does it all off the top of his head. He didn't come in with like any notes or any like outline. He would just come in and say, yeah, today we're going to do triads in these positions, and he spent the next hour just talking about all those things. Pretty incredible. But really every single one of our instructors is like that, in that they it's beyond being qualified. They're people who are at the top of the game in whatever they're doing. Marla Fibish doing Irish mandolin. There isn't a better Irish mandolin player on the scene than her, and it's just really fantastic.
More of a Zen thing.
Yeah, it's so that's really fun and really satisfying is to be part of that.
But of course, we have to say that this simply isn't enough to keep you busy. You're still out performing and recording stuff.
Well, certainly that has slowed down a bit over the last year. But yes, so I still, I perform as much as I can. Pre-pandemic, that usually meant, I don't know, 2 or 3 times a month or something like that. Primarily here in the Bay Area. I mean, it's pretty rare that I go out of town, but it does happen. I've put together a lot of kind of fingerstyle guitar night type shows with visiting players doing like a round robin of playing, and I hosted a couple shows like that were recurring shows. I did a thing at the Bazaar Cafe in San Francisco that I hosted for 12 years, once a month. And I did another one. up here. I live up here in Fairfax in Marin. I did one at a club called the Sleeping Lady that closed down, unfortunately, for 6 or 7 years. And I've hosted these kinds of shows. I mean, you mentioned some of the venues. I've done them at the Freight. I've done them at the Throckmorton in Mill Valley. I've done them, different house concerts and all that kind of stuff. So that is a great thing, and I sure hope that a version of that will come back. I've played a couple times now since the pandemic, and it's great. But I have a feeling that the rest of this year is going to keep staying a little weird in terms of booking things and stuff. So now I've got this duo with Doug Young, and that's kind of, in terms of playing out, that's kind of my focus. I'm trying to get us playing as much as we can, but we've got a couple things on the book. So
if anybody watching has not seen one of the shows, the shows in the round, the guitars in the round, it's worth a look.
they're a ton of fun.
Yeah, it's certainly worth a look.
I mean, the online ones were fun, but of course they're even funner when you can do it in real life. So, and going back to some of my connections when I was working with acoustic guitar, people would contact me from out of town. They're coming through the Bay Area and just saying, "Hey, can we put something together?" And a lot of times I will try to do things, and we've done some great shows that way. So,
Excellent.
yeah.
Do you have time? We both know you're an avid biker.
Yes.
Anything else
About the guitar and things? Speaking of Peghead Nation, actually, if listeners want to check out the site, we can do a promo code so people can check it out for a month for free. So people can, if you want to use a promo code, just Santa Cruz. As you check out, you can get a month of any course for free. So that'll be a special Santa Cruz promo code for podcast listeners.
Oh, that's outstanding. Yeah, we will have links to everything, including.
Yeah, so you can link, and if you want to include the promo code in whatever you're writing up for it, you can totally do that. So that would be really fun. We'd love to have people from the podcast checking us out.
Wonderful, thank you. What a nice offer.
Of course.
When you go about to review a guitar, what do you look for?
I look for different, I mean, I start, the first thing, of course, I mean, if you open the case and, you form an opinion right away, right? Because you see the thing. But I tend to, I mean, the first thing, I look at the guitar and I kind of look at what is it made out of and how is it, how well is it put together, right? You see the little craftsmanship things and stuff right away when you've been doing it for a long time. In terms of playing and the sound, there's really two things involved. There is, do I like the guitar? But ultimately, whether I like the guitar isn't that important. I really try to put myself into the mindset of who would this guitar be good for?
That's what I'm really interested in, because you really do have to maintain some kind of.
Because for one thing, if I only reviewed guitars that I like, I mean, I like a lot of guitars, so maybe I'm proving myself wrong right here. But it's not really about me, right? I mean, I'll say something like, this really worked well for whatever I'm doing. But for starters, I don't believe in the best guitar doesn't exist, right? Because it's different for everybody, or it's different. It might not be different for everybody. For example, Doug Young and I play very similarly, and we tend to agree on what we like, right? But Scott Nygaard and I don't necessarily think the same guitars are great, because he is a flat picker and he plays totally different from the way I play. And so we have different needs for a guitar, right? And so I try to think, like, if I'm reviewing a guitar that, let's say I'm reviewing a Dreadnought, and it might not have the kind of response that I look for in a fingerstyle guitar, but I can see that it would really be a fantastic guitar if it's driven a little harder. Um, I'm going to write about that. I'm going to talk about that because that's why we have so many guitars, is to kind of find out who something's good for. And so I try to think of like something that might have a sound that I think would sound really good for accompanying vocals or in an ensemble context. Being a solo guitar player, I tend to look for a really rich sounding guitar that'll work great on its own. But some of the guitars that I might really like, might get drowned out in an ensemble context. You might want something that has a little bit more of a narrow range of a sound that kind of fits into a pocket in a little different way. So I really kind of try to, I mean, it's easiest if I pick up a guitar and I go like, wow, this is exactly what I like to play. Then that's easy. But just because I don't like something for my own playing doesn't mean that it's not good. And I think that's a really important thing to kind of figure out if you're in my position demoing and reviewing a lot of guitars. It's, my personal opinion for what I like is only a small niche of what an instrument might do. Now, when it comes to craftsmanship and playability and things like that, it becomes more of a hard and fast kind of thing, right? I mean, if the craftsmanship is sloppy, I think that should be pointed out because that affects everybody. But then again, a lot of things are really cosmetic only, right? I mean, if there are things that really don't affect the quality of the guitar in terms of the functionality, like when I first started reviewing guitars, I would always look for like little drops of glue inside the guitar and stuff like that. And, yes, on a really high-end custom guitar, it's really nice when it's super clean inside, right? You're paying all that money, and I think it is a sign of a certain level of care and attention to detail. Does it really matter if there's a blob of glue next to the kerfing? It probably doesn't. So, it's that kind of thing. It's and certainly the cost of an instrument will also affect that. You can't judge a $300 guitar the same way that you would judge a $15,000 guitar.
So I think I recall a couple of reviews where you've done that, where you had a review of a guitar and you've had Scott come in and play it in order to, emphasize the qualities of the guitar.
We really like doing that.
Yeah, but let me put you on the spot. Have you ever had somebody send something in for review where you pulled it out and you played it and you just said, "There's no way in hell I'm going to do this"?
Yes. It hasn't happened.
Say more.
No. It hasn't happened since we started doing the Peghead Nation thing. Possibly because most of the instruments that we get in are fairly high end. We work with our partners such as Santa Cruz. Santa Cruz is not going to send me a guitar that isn't going to work, right? Loudon isn't going to send me a guitar like that. Thompson isn't going to send me a guitar like that, right? It's a level of guitars where really it is about finding they're all good guitars. There's no question about that, right? I've had guitars sent to me where they would arrive and they just weren't playable. It was usually a playability thing, and I would go, how did that make it past someone in quality control? It would be super buzzy, or it would be, either the action is really high or really low. Maybe it could have happened in shipping. And usually what I would do is I would get in touch with them and ask to send another one, because it was an obvious flaw that I can't assume that they're all like that, and I can't pan somebody because of that. That's kind of my take on that.
That's really that's great.
I mean, if I walked into a store and I saw 5 of those and they all had that same problem, you can base an opinion on that. But stuff happens.
Right.
Stuff happens. So that's kind of that. I don't know. So yeah, I have I have reviewed and demoed a lot of guitars in 25 years.
Well, and you've been in a very unique position in terms of electronics and recording and
Mm.
microphones and amps. In 25 years, those things have changed a fair bit. We're getting into a lot of solid state stuff, a lot of modeling, a lot of impulse response, and
Yeah,
I mean, what do
they
you think about what that is happening right
they
now?
they have they have changed, and they haven't really changed that fundamentally, you know? I mean, I think sort of just before I got into this game, that's sort of when the big changes happened. Um, but still, most guitars have an undersaddle pickup in it, and they've gotten better. Um, but I think the Fishman Matrix was already out when I worked at Tall Toad, and it's still the number one selling pickup out there. So yes, things have changed and different systems have come along. I mean, in a way, it's kind of funny because my own personal rig has changed very little in 15 years or something like that.
Still paying it off at Tall Toad?
Well, here's the fun thing about Tall Toad. I haven't worked at Tall Toad since I started working at Acoustic Guitar, so it's almost 25 years. They still give me my employee discount.
Bravo, bravo.
Yeah, so that's I love that store. And but in terms of stuff, it's great to geek out with all kinds of different things. The kind of gigs I play, I don't tend to have a lot of time to futz around with my setup when I show up, and I just need stuff to work. And I don't want to be there tweaking knobs and setting parameters and trying out different things when I'm at the gig. So um, fundamentally, my setup has been Bag's Anthems in my main steel string guitars. And I have a Bag's Parody Eye preamp, the one that everyone is using. It's been around for 20 years. And there are some things that sort of drift in and out. Like I've used a couple of different reverb pedals. I like having reverb on my board. Just again, if all you play is really nice venues, you don't need any other stuff. You put a mic in front of the guitar and you're done. Or you give them a DI and you let the engineer figure out what reverb to use. I get to play those places occasionally, and it's great. But I might also play a total in the trenches gig in some coffee shop where there's no monitors and whatever. It's got a 40-year-old PV head and some mystery speaker, right? Well, you still have to be able to sound okay with that. And I've seen too many situations where people had really complicated setups that just took way too long to dial in at the gig and maybe didn't even sound very good in sort of a less than ideal situation. And so I like to be able to get 90% of the way there almost all the time, and maybe a little better some of the time, but I prefer that over getting there 100% of the time occasionally and just really not getting there at all the rest of the time. So for me, just having a basic setup with a Parody Eye and either an Anthem. I also have a Fishman Rare Earth blend in a couple of guitars, and for some situations, having the magnetic pickup is really great, especially larger stages with no sound checks. Or situations where you're playing, like occasionally I'll back up a singer-songwriter, say, and if they're using a guitar with an undersaddle pickup, having a second guitar sound with a magnetic is a really great thing because it gives you a totally different voice and a different sound quality. And so for those kind of things, that can be really great.
Yeah, I'm just realizing what a great benefit or boon that would be to be able to say, no, dear, it's just here for review.
Well, I do that all the time. I mean, there's so much stuff. There's so much stuff coming through here all the time. It's kind of ridiculous. Yeah.
Well,
but,
if you were to ignore travel and paycheck,
yeah.
What is your ideal gig?
My ideal gig?
Yeah. If you're ignoring the travel issues, ignoring whether you're going to get paid or not, just What's your
Well,
ideal?
it's it's a gig with great listeners. I mean, it could be a house concert. It's not about the size of the gig. I mean, some of my all-time favorite gigs were house concerts with 20 people. If that's the thing, if that's the vibe, you can play, with no electronics. You just sit there and play, and it can be really great. But yeah, playing a great performing arts center with 500 people, that's really nice. And I've only done that a handful of times, but I've tasted the blood to know it. It's really nice.
The blood's in
um,
the water.
yeah, that's really great. It's of course really fun to um, share a gig with other players who are friends and who are great players. Maybe people who you look up to. Probably my all-time favorite tour that I did. Um, well, I've done a couple, but I did Peter Finger's International Guitar Night tour in Germany back in 2005, I think, and that was me, Peter Finger, uh, Konark Reddy from India, who's amazing, and Dylan Fowler, who's a wonderful player from Wales, and we did a week of different things in Germany, and we played really nice venues, and I was the weakest link on that tour. But it was just really encouraging and fun and uplifting to play with people who do this all the time. I mean, I play guitar all the time, but I don't tour all the time, right? I've been really lucky in that my day job has been everything I do is related to the guitar, right? So for the last 30 years, I haven't done anything professionally that wasn't directly tied into this thing that I love doing. But I've never made my living only playing guitar. And so, it's a big deal for me to go out and tour in Germany for a week or something like that. It's not something that it just sort of happens twice a year or something like that. So those things are really uplifting. It's great. I love that. But back to your original question, it's really about having a receptive listening audience that makes a great gig. And whether it's 20 people or 500 people, doesn't really matter. And I really do feed off the being with my peers and sharing this music with other players, and I really like the round robin thing of kind of feeding off that. I've done a lot of shows with Eric Sky like that, and it's the camaraderie is definitely a big aspect of it.
Very nice. Very nice.
We've talked to Richard Hoover about that NAMM camaraderie that comes
Yeah.
up, and that seems to be like the flashpoint for everybody, that they know they're all going to see each other at this one period of time.
Right.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. Oh, it's an important part of this, for sure.
That community. Yeah.
Yeah. I think one thing I'd like to maybe go out on is again, I'm really impressed with your experience, both as a musician, a teacher, a business person, a technologist, whatever else you want to add on to that list. It seems like at the center of all this has been the acoustic guitar.
Well, and that's really, go ahead.
Well, I'll say, if you were to take all that experience and look ahead 5 years or 10 years, ignoring pandemics and all that kind of stuff, how do you see this whole thing going? Where do you see it evolving into? What are your projections into the future of all this?
Well, as we've learned last year, any projections are bound to go off the rails, right? But I don't know. And the truth is, I mean, I was saying earlier how, this whole becoming a music professional, if you want to call it that, I didn't sit down when I was 19 saying, in 10 years, I really hope to be a music professional. And it sort of has kept going like that. I've been really fortunate that sort of, one door closes, another opens, and things happen that some of the things I make happen, and other things I think I've just been really fortunate. And so I don't really have this crystal ball. I mean, I'm having a great time with Peghead Nation. And again, I'm so fortunate in, working with two partners that I enjoy working with, that I think, we can be productive with as a team. So that's going to keep going, right? There's not going to be a major fundamental change with that. It's only going to get better, I think. I, this balance of quote day job, whether it's related to guitar or not. In my case, again, I've been so lucky that everything I've done has been part of this. You know, I do like to play out, and I would rather do more of it than less of it. Let's put it like that. This project with Doug has been really fun. I'm way overdue with another solo project, so I have to get going on that. And I've been saying that for an embarrassingly long time. So I don't really see a big fundamental change. My daughter is now 15, so probably in a few years it'll be easier to go away for longer periods of time. So perhaps that'll be a factor. But I don't know. It's my long-term plan is to keep doing what I'm doing because I really like doing it. That's kind of it, there isn't, I don't, yeah. So again, I've been so fortunate in that, whether it's working for a magazine, whether it's, I had this sort of intense in-between period between after I was laid off at Acoustic Guitar. Before Peghead Nation really kicked in, I was freelancing for basically every guitar magazine out there, right? I was writing for Guitar Player, I was writing for Premier Guitar, I was writing for a little bit for Fretboard Journal, I was writing for 2 magazines in Germany, in German, which was new to me. That was all related. I still occasionally do a little translation work for Peter Finger's company, Acoustic Music Records. And I really do it just because I like being part of that family, and Peter's a friend, and it's just a nice little thing to stay connected in that way. So yeah, I've done so many things around this, and I think it's always going to be, there's going to be periods where I do more of one thing and less of something, and it just sort of switches around. But ultimately, I think I'm in too deep to make a major change.
Well, I guess what I was wondering is when we talk to some people, they go back and they say, oh, 25, 30 years ago, I didn't have access to the records or the music or the instruments. And now Peghead Nation is out there making access to the lessons so easy for anybody. Right. The music is available for anybody to listen to. Sure. The instruments that are being made, you can get really, you look at some of the inexpensive instruments that are in the market.
They're the best instruments ever made.
Yes. So it's like everything seems to be gearing towards an incredible renaissance and resurgence of this kind of music and acoustic players. But on the other side of the coin, there are fewer places to play.
Absolutely.
Fewer people that are interested in listening, it seems sometimes. Yeah.
No, absolutely.
That's all I was trying to get at, is how you're looking at all this, what your thoughts
are. Well, certainly that is a challenge, right? Because we are so focused on, especially it was such a blessing over the last year to be able to do these events online, right? It's great to be able to, our whole business is based on, online instruction, and it's super important for everything we do, right? We're not going back. That certainly is the case. But I think we also have to remember, like you say, is, get out and meet people, right? Go see shows, because, we don't want it to be like the Olympics are right now, right? What a mess that is.
Oh, did you see any of the opening ceremonies?
But just some pictures, but
well, yeah, wow. But there's cardboard.
Nobody there. I know.
It's cardboard, and it's. Did they get all that from the NFL? And
who knows?
Is there like a plane that showed up with all these cardboard people on it?
It must have. So, like I said, Well, let's cut to the chase. My favorite thing in the world to do is to play guitar to people who are enjoying that, right? I mean, and so we as artists need those people to come out and see us, listen to us, buy our music or whatever. I mean, buying music is something that we've probably seen the end of anyway. But uh, so yeah, I think it is super important, and I think that is, partially that is why Doug and I decided to, sort of put a hold on these live stream shows. It's because I think when you're in a situation like that, and you typically, when we play in the Bay Area, we'll play for, what is it, between, I'm going to say between 15 and 100 people, right? Is about sort of the average audience that we tend to get. Well, if you're live streaming that same show and 10 people decide to watch you online instead of coming to your show, that makes a big difference. Um, and yeah, it's great to be able to have your friends in another part of the country or something like that be a part of that. But I think focusing on having people go back out and see live music uh, is really important.
Here,
Uh,
here.
now we're still in a weird situation. Are we ready to be in a small club with a bunch of people not wearing masks? I don't know. I'm still not totally comfortable with that. So I think we're definitely still in a transition period. Um, but things are happening. A lot of things are happening outdoors, and it's super important to support it.
Here, here.
There you go.
So that's kind of where we're at.
Yeah, get vaccinated and listen to some music.
And go meet up with your friends and play some guitars, because it's a
Yeah.
lot funner when you're doing it with other people. Yeah.
You have been incredibly gracious with your time.
Well,
We
it's
can't
been a lot
say
of fun.
we can't say thanks enough. These podcasts have taken a strange focus in who we're talking to. We talked to James May,
Mhm.
which was unbelievably interesting, and then Richard, every 3 or 4
Right.
podcasts to get his access. I just had the opportunity to drive him to Southern California
Okay.
for a day, and
Okay.
when I told Eric I was doing it, he said, "God, it's got to be like a 6-hour podcast with Hoover."
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and I should say, I mean, we really haven't talked much about, Santa Cruz and sort of my relationship with the company. I don't own a Santa Cruz guitar, but I have nothing but respect for everyone at Santa Cruz, and I consider Richard and Carolyn good friends. And every time I've spent time with Richard and Carolyn and everyone else down there, it's just very special. And the history and the importance that Richard has sort of in American steel string guitar just can't be overstated. Of really being part of, and in many ways being responsible for, this resurgence of handmade high-end instruments. I think most people in our world universally recognize that, but it really can't be overstated. And he is so fun to be around. He's so willing to share his information, and the shop is amazing. I mean, I have, it's quite possible that I've been to more luthier shops and guitar factories than anybody else in the last 25 years. And I see these little differences in all the shops, and the Santa Cruz shop is really, really great. I mean, that's not to say that there aren't other great shops, right? All these sort of mid-level uh, production shops, whether it's Santa Cruz, Collings, all those shops, they all have figured out their own ways. But that's the thing, everyone has figured out their own ways. And Richard's done a thing that no one else does in building the guitars the way they do it. And that's just really, really cool.
It's a really incredible industry to be a part of and be around, because it really is just made up of craftsmen and people that care. And there's very few people in this side of the thing that are ugly or are just not 100% in with both feet.
Well, everyone's in it because they're passionate about this thing, right? No
Yeah.
one, I shouldn't say no one, but very few people go to school uh, to be a Richard Hoover, right? You can't do that. People don't grow up thinking I'm going to run a guitar company. Usually, people snowball into it because they like the guitar, because they like to play, because they start tinkering with stuff. And so I think the passion always gets ahead of sort of the economics of it, right? No one would do this if they were thinking about making a living with this, right? Because that usually doesn't kick in until you're well into this, this endeavor, and so the passion has to be there, and that's what makes the industry special. It's that, and it's this willingness to share information that I think has been really incredible, and it's a thing that's unique to American guitar making. You don't see it in Europe. What I've seen there is that a lot of times there's still a lot more kind of industry secrets and people not wanting to talk about how they're doing things, where, like the things Bob Taylor has done with UV cured finishes and CNC and sharing that information with other people in the industry is legendary. It's amazing. He's elevated everyone else, and I think Richard's done similar things at his level of building guitars that has really helped everyone else out, and together we're stronger. So
gotta love the work because the stock options suck.
Well, yeah. So, that's really kind of where it's at.
Thank you so much.
Okay. Well, thank you guys.
Great thing to leave on. We will make sure that everybody has access to you and knows how to find you, and knows where to sign up for a free month.
Santa Cruz will be the promo code, and
there you go.
Do that. Yeah.
Thank you so much.
All right. Thank you, guys. We'll talk soon.
Yeah.
Pleasant day. Bye.
All right. Bye-bye.
We hope you enjoyed this installment of the Santa Cruz Coffee Break. For more music-related fun, please join the Santa Cruz Guitar Players Forum at SCGCPF or santacruzguitarplayers.com. If you have any questions or possible podcast topics, please contact us. If you have a product or service that you feel would be of value to our listeners, please consider adding your support and keeping the coffee pot on. Contact us for more information. We ask that you hit the like, follow, bell, or bookmark buttons so we can keep you informed of upcoming podcast episodes. We hope you enjoyed Santa Cruz Coffee Break. Now it's time to go play your guitar.